So first of all, let's have a look at medieval crime and punishment. Now, this first section of each of the different areas is important because it gives you the structure for which society sees itself. And very much for medieval period, we're looking at this idea of hierarchy. So we have the king at the top, then the barons and the knights, and then the peasants. And it's very, very much to do with the idea of structure. But what we also need to say, and this is really important for the medieval period, is above the king, we also have the concept of God and God's place in society. And we'll see that linked to their crime and their punishment as well. So again, structure. God at the top, then the king with divine right, Sundays being sacred, the consumption of alcohol being a problem is going to be a consistent theme because it goes against, though it's part of celebration, it goes against the idea of keeping Sunday sacred. We've got the villages and towns very much separated. We've got people working very close next to each other. And that's necessarily going to cause arguments, particularly when you consider bottom section down here, the different weapons that they've got. And we've got potential for famines and wars to cause issue. And then we've got society being broken down into different problems, different times when that structure is attacked, and that causes us issues. Types of crime in medieval time. Well, the thing that stands out here is the high level of murder at 18.2%. It's a high level there, although we've got to remember this includes accidents, includes manslaughter, and includes suicide as well. Because of the nature of strip farming, where they're right next to each other with all those weapons, it means a fight can often break out, and because there's a lack of medical care, people often die of wounds. Hunger is a major issue because of the poor harvests. And as a result of that, particularly after the Black Death, we get vagrancy becoming a crime after 1351 as people travel from place to place, trying to get the better deal, trying to get more money, trying to survive, and at the same time the hierarchy, the nobility, seeing it as something they'd feared, something that causes problems within their structured society. Crime of scolding is increasing an issue at this point. Because we've got poverty, outlaw gangs become a problem. But a major focus here is on religious beliefs. The idea that going against God, gambling, even shaving on Sunday, homosexuality, and the Lollards are a particularly religious group trying to change the religious structure. These are all issues which become crimes. Now, the law is restructured after 1351 to include treason. So high treason goes against the king, petty treason goes against the man of the house. But interestingly, part of the king's desire, the government's desire to make sure the coins stay pure, is counterfeiting coins also becomes treason and is punishable in the same way. So major change here. 1285, Edward I passed the Statute of Winchester, sets up a voluntary service. So we have sheriffs, who are often wealthy nobles, working with coroners and chief constables in an area. We have very much a local aspect to this. So an armed posse would be used to track down a criminal. Locally, we'd have chief constables of the 100 who'd serve for 1 year, and then more locally, you'd have the parish constables who would look to catch criminals and ensure all men provide armed service, and particularly they'd enforce the idea that when a crime had been committed, there would be a hue and cry. And that would be an obligation for people to take part in this. So here we have the crime committed, we have the initial response, and then we have the two different systems. So for lesser crimes, we have the manor and the court, the borough court or the church court system. Later on, we got the JPs. And then we got for the more serious crimes, we got the quarter-session or assizes, and we've also got the JP courts after 1361. Interestingly, the juries would come from the accused local areas and would be chosen because they know the defendant and would be able to give an informed view, which is very different to our local view that you wouldn't get someone who knew the defendant. And here we just have confirmation of those various different types of courts. So just as the peace become more important after 1361, local gentry, the well educated, and they replaced the sheriff courts. 3 to 4 per county, and after 1388. So we can see this developing as we go through a more developed system. They hold the quarter sessions, which are held every 4 times per year. Manor courts are more the local crimes, the more non-serious crimes, passed to them by the tithings or constables, individuals, and they start fading into the early modern. That's one change we're going to see between medieval and early modern. Towns have got the similar borough courts and have a town watch, so it's slightly different out to the countryside. Church courts are try moral crimes and put priests on trial, often trying people for adultery as well. And I mentioned this earlier, juries selected from the accused homes areas often don't take longer than 20 minutes. More than half of all judgments were not guilty, so people tended to find in favour of the accused. Punishments in the medieval period, whether it be fine, particularly for those who could afford them, for the rich people, particularly those who were involved in crimes against money in the first place, so traders or thieves or gamblers, and anyone who didn't take part, any villagers didn't take part in the hue and cry. We also have public humiliation. Scolds would have the cock and stool. Borough courts used stocks and pillories, so they'd embarrass people, they'd show them up in front of their society, as we can see happening here. Imprisonment, we did have prisons, but they're not generally used apart from debtors and forgers who couldn't afford to pay their fine. And you had to pay your jailer for all your goods, including your food or your bedding and so forth. So you'd have to be rich to be having a good time in prison. And of course, the very rich could afford that. Punishment for murder or burglary, from 1275, rape and stealing goods for more than 12 days. That's more than the purchase of a sheep. That would be involved hanging, and we have to remember hanging at this point isn't an immediate, it's not a quick death, it's a slow death. 80% of hangings were for non-violent crime like stealing. If you committed high treason, you go against the state, and this isn't as surprising as the state that's organised this. You'd be hung, drawn, and quartered. So hung until you're almost dead, and then your insides would be exposed, cut into, and cut out of you, including your private parts potentially being burned in front of you. Then you'd be chopped into 4 parts, and you'd be displayed as a sign to stop other people. Heresy was a very serious crime because it goes against God, and could lead to you being burned alive. Same true for petty treason because you're breaking down society. There were ways to avoid punishment. You could join outlaws, although that obviously has a risk as you get caught, because that itself is a crime. You could seek sanctuary and then abjure the state. So if you went to a church and stayed there for a certain amount of days, got the bishop or the local priest to support you, you would be allowed to abjure the state. That means you'd have to leave the kingdom. Basically, medieval people were saying, we don't want you here, go and cause a problem in another country. You could seek benefit of the clergy, so you could say you were part of the clergy, for which you'd have to recite part of the Bible. If you were really rich, you could buy a pardon from the king, or you could join the army abroad and serve the king that way.